heavy payments.
Dr. Fauci, give us vaccines.
He's not the kind of shaved Santa Claus that we represent. People were dancing around singing songs about him. We think he was on talk shows as a sort of celebrity. It's ridiculous. This is what happens when you have massive, centralised, authoritarian, globalist, corporatist systems that never ask people, the very people that are funding it, whether what they're doing is what those people want. And that applies to this ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia, research of this nature, the response to the pandemic, institutions like the WHO and NATO. You might not want them, but you're funding them. I think we should have political parties that are going, listen, do you want this stuff? Because some of it seems a bit corrupt. Because I don't know anyone who's like, I love paying taxes. At best, you're like, I pay my taxes because it's the law, and I hope on some level it's helping people, like kids or hospitals or something. You work all day. You don't even get an invoice, do you? You don't even get a breakdown of, so what did you spend it on, guys? Let's have a look. Buy out what? We can't do this complex content without the support of our sponsors. Can you imagine what it's like being us and going, oh, can we have some money, please? And tell me, what do you guys do? We say, bring down the corporatist state, bring down the system. Here, have some money. We can't go to Pfizer. We can't go to Lockheed Martin. We go to these guys. Stay to the end of the ad. I'll make it funny, baby. Now, if you want to cheat death and cheat sweet lady time herself, you're going to need to look after your skin. That is why I'm recommending Genucell Skincare. We need sponsors like Genucell Skincare. It's hard for us to get sponsors because we're radical and we're anti-corporate and all that stuff. Now, these guys at Genucell want you to look and feel your best. You're going to look young and gorgeous. That's why they've introduced their 3-step dark spot luxury system that works in just 3 minutes. Have you got 3 minutes? Stay there. If you're bothered by dark spots on your face or liver spots on your hideous hands, neck and chest, then this is the way to watch them disappear safely and quickly. Just before this video, I was just one enormous liver spot. I've smothered myself in Genucell. I've drunk down a pint of the stuff. I've never looked more beautiful. Their luxury system contains a dark spot corrector. Correct those dark spots. Some fancy sounding microdermabrasion and collagen builder thrown in for good measure. That's why I'm looking so cool. And if you're not blown away by the results, you get your money back. You might go, hold on a minute, I'm still as hideous as I was yesterday. So go to genucell.com/brand to order their new dark spot treatment system today and say goodbye to those pesky, stinking, wretched spots tomorrow. And as a special bonus, all 3 products are included in Genucell's most popular package for August. So you'll get their bags and puffiness serum also included, all for 70% off the retail price. Just go to genucell.com/brand. When some of these bugs escaped from laboratories in the US back in 2014, the Obama administration banned gain-of-function research, Kennedy added, so Fauci outsourced it overseas. Well, that can't lead to any problems unless there's a war and it leaks out of the labs because they're not properly looked after. Hopefully all that information isn't somehow being lost. 2019, Wuhan. A lot of them went to Ukraine, Kennedy told Carlson. I don't really want to hear Ukraine connected to anything other than there's this war there where Russia criminally invaded them and there's a humanitarian effort to support the people of Ukraine. Who's not down with that? We're all down with that, right? But then you sort of hear, oh God, another thing about Ukraine you should know, the president's son's got all sorts of really favourable deals with their energy companies. Oh, another thing, the American government have got a bunch of biolabs over there. I mean, like, what's next about Ukraine are we going to learn? A lot of them went to Ukraine, Kennedy told Carlson. While some of the research was moved to Wuhan, China laboratory, the suspected origination point for the COVID-19 pandemic. Like, these are sort of places that are on the news a lot, aren't they? Like Wuhan, Ukraine. What's the first thing you think of Ukraine? There's this war there where American taxpayers are funding it. Good. What's the first thing about Wuhan? Well, I've only really heard of Wuhan. Terrible wet markets. Do be careful in those wet markets. You could pick up something disgusting. But at a price that's right. Most of the research was funded by the Pentagon. That's weird, isn't it? Or by USAID, which Kennedy described as a CIA cutout. That's extraordinary. So the deep state fund secondary agencies subcontract out to opaque, obscure endeavours that are difficult to understand and inventory. Certainly it's not the kind of transparency and clarity that Joe Biden was promising when he marched gleefully into office, is it? The US has long dismissed claims about the biological research laboratories in Ukraine as Russian propaganda, until senior State Department official Victoria Nuland confirmed their existence at a 2022 Senate hearing. The Pentagon continues to insist the research is neither illegal nor intended for military purposes. Okay, so we're just doing some research in Ukraine.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of.
Isn't it odd what malevolence looks like these days? Just a nice, friendly-looking woman in a cardigan talking about biolabs in Ukraine and the concern that Russia might get hold of it while nervously fiddling with her pen. In this also is the modern assumption that there's nothing wrong with biolabs when America's in control of them, but if Russia's in control of them, suddenly they're bad. Either cluster bombs and biolabs are bad, or they're not. And we have to recognize that this is the kind of nihilism and lack of principles that's leading to the general dystopic feelings of a society falling apart that many of us are experiencing even beyond the confines of this mad conflict. If there's nothing to worry about in those biolabs, why is it a problem if Russia gets there?
So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
What you're being asked to believe is that there's some fundamental difference between American research and Russian conduct. Like the Americans, come on guys, let's just create some new medicines to help everybody. Let's make this virus a bit worse, then make a vaccine so we can just help people. Wait a minute, we could use this to create a super weapon. It's not like it had an innocent purpose and then Russia is the agent of change and malevolence. It's plainly a pretty secretive and malfeasant endeavour that takes place on foreign soil because under the Obama administration it was decreed to be too dangerous to do in America. So they, as part of their deal presumably of supporting the 2014 coup that Victoria Nuland was by coincidence involved with, they're able to continue doing at least gain-of-function research, which according to RFK is synonymous with creating weapons. And in a way, if gain-of-function means you take a biological substance and you give it the ability to cross species, or you make it more infectious and bad and just hope to God that those guys in Wuhan are washing their hands and keeping the window shut. That is a type of weapon. It's certainly irresponsible. Where I like to invite you to come with me is broad out and go, do you want this even happening? Can't we be doing something else? I find it offensive. Nuland's bizarre admission that Ukraine has biological research facilities that are dangerous enough to warrant concern that they could fall into Russian hands ironically constituted more decisive evidence of the existence of such programs in Ukraine than what was offered in 2002 and 2003 to corroborate US allegations about Saddam's chemical and biological programs in Iraq. Wow, that's more evidence than the world went to war on 20 years ago. That's a good way of putting it. Any attempt to claim that Ukraine's biological facilities are just benign and standard medical labs is negated by Nuland's explicitly grave concern that Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of those facilities and that the US government therefore is right this minute working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces. What we're being invited to believe is it was an entirely innocent enterprise, but actually though, the Russians, they'd be able to put this in that jar and switch that on and turn on the Bunsen burner and knock over the mouse's cage and oh no, they've got a missile. That's what we're being invited to believe. And there's no doubt that like a bad person or a bad set of people could use almost anything to create chaos. But what I'm arguing is that the bad people are already doing that and you're funding it. The only reason to be quite concerned about these biological research facilities falling into Russian hands is if they contain sophisticated materials that Russian scientists have not yet developed on their own and which could be used for nefarious purposes, i.e. either advanced biological weapons or dual-use research that has the potential to be weaponized. You see how we're all having to develop this new vocabulary and get this new education? When I first heard dual-use research, it was reading RFK's book, and at that point it was like, oh god, this is a bit out there, isn't it? Even though it's obviously really thoroughly researched and actually quite dense. It's not a frivolous piece of writing, it's just some of the concepts and ideas in there are so out there, you think that can't be true. And then you just, a few weeks later, you read it in the news or you see a congressional hearing and they go, we're a bit worried about some of the stuff in the labs we might have left over there. If that fell into the wrong hands. I guess what I'm saying is now my starting point is they're probably up to some malevolent shit and they're probably going to lie about it. We probably have to break down all of these agencies and have a real overview of what it means to be America or the United Kingdom or whatever your country is. And go, is this what you want? Who is it now we're supposed to be scared of? Who's scarier than these lunatics that are there doing gain-of-function research and dual research and creating these labs and then having to admit, oh sorry, we were involved in 2014 and oh yes, we did have bio biolabs. The only way you could trust them is if on day one of the war, Joe Biden had gone, listen, this is a bit mental actually, because like Ukraine and Russia, you can see there's an escalating tension there. And I think morally we should support Ukraine because they're decent people and Russia are the aggressor in this instance. I've got to be honest though, we provoked them in 2014. We reneged on a deal we had not to infringe on former Soviet Union territories. We got biolabs in Ukraine we're going to be double careful of. And one of my kids has got a cracking job at Burisma. He didn't say that, did he? So now that it's all coming out, I think, you fucking liars! What is in those Ukrainian biological labs that makes them so worrisome and dangerous? And did the US assistance extend to construction and development to the biological research facilities themselves? All we're doing over there is making L'Oreal lipsticks for little mice. In those labs are just mice and rabbits smothered in lipstick, but if the Russians get hold of those sexy mice and rabbits, there's no telling what they'll do. The indisputable reality is that despite long-standing international conventions banning development of biological weapons, all large, powerful countries conduct research that, at the very least, has the capacity to be converted into biological weapons. The work conducted under the guise of defensive research can, and sometimes is, easily converted into the banned weapons themselves. Recall that according to the FBI, the 2001 anthrax attacks that terrorized the nation came from a US Army research scientist, Dr. Bruce Ivins, working at the US Army's Infectious Disease Research Lab in Fort Detrick, Maryland. The claim was that the Army was merely conducting